Alright, so who here cares about their dietary intake? Alright, for you guys. Second question, who knows what GMOs are? Okay, if you guys know what GMOs are. So, GMOs, or also known as genetically modified organisms, are the result of a process of taking genes from one species and inserting them into another in an attempt to obtain a desired trait or characteristic, such as resistance to pesticide. So, in America, over 80% of our food, believe it or not, includes GMOs such as cereals, snack bars, processed meat, cookies, any kind of snack that's over the counter at not drugstores, but convenience stores that are packaged. And studies from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine states that animal studies with GMOs show serious health risks such as infertility, immune problems, accelerated aging, faulty insulin regulation, and much more. And so my third question is, are GMOs really safe for consumption? And with that, my proposition for this is that genetically modified organisms will eventually have a negative effect on our health. And before I present my three statements, I would like to transition and address those of you who did not know what GMOs are. And it's not surprising that you guys did not know what they are, because over 70% of our prepackaged wholesale goods are GMOs, and consumers are completely unaware of that, because there is no requirement for labeling of GMOs within grocery stores. So the research from the Food Policy Institute at Rutgers College estimates that only 52% of Americans realize that genetically modified foods are sold in grocery stores, and 26% believe that they have ever eaten GMOs, which is a 6% increase from 2011. The reason why GMOs are not labeled is because they have not implemented it. In 1992, the FDA issued a policy statement that defined material or modified ingredients as the ability to be sensed by taste, smell, or other senses. And the FDA determined that GE foods, or genetically engineered foods, were substantially equivalent to conveniently produced foods. So there was no material difference, resulting in no labelings ever since then for the next 20 years until now. So my three statements are: the consumption of GMOs can potentially lead to allergic reactions. Genetically modified organisms have a health risk related to liver and reproductive systems and much more. And the functioning genetically modified genes will remain inside you after consumption. Going with the first claim, the modification of a plant or organism genes can create a mix of foreign proteins, and this is the claim that I'm talking about with the allergic reactions, that are not indigenous to the original DNA and can cause new allergic reactions to the body. So for example, a protein from a plant you're originally allergic to could be inserted to a different plant and could result in an allergic reaction that you did not know about. And another example is that scientists believe because of this cause, the protein's ability to withstand heat and gastric juices may be the cause of an allergic reaction. And the gene spliced proteins, which have never been introduced to a human body but have been introduced into a plant before, can cause problems even if animal testing shows success, because our anatomy is not completely similar to that of animals. The health risks of GMOs have increased since the past. In the United Kingdom, 50% of allergies have been recorded with soy. And a skin prick test shows that some individuals react to genetically modified soy, but not natural soy. So natural soy, such as organic, that have not been engineered. My second claim is that genetically modified organisms have a health risk related to the liver and reproductive system. Going back to the animal tests on rats that were fed genetically modified potatoes had smaller and deteriorated livers, and rats that were fed genetically modified canola had 12 to 16% heavier livers. So also with that, babies of female rats that were fed genetically modified soy were considerably smaller. So soy, canola, and all these other genetically modified organisms created a toll on the anatomy of the rats in a negative way. My third point is that the functioning genetically modified genes will remain inside of you. Genetically modified proteins will still remain within our bodies even after we stop consuming these GMOs. One of the severe dangers of having genetically modified crops becoming resistant to bacteria is that if the genes were to transfer into our own bodies, it could create deadly diseases, which are resistant to antibiotics. So antibiotics after this consumption of GMOs are likely to not be effective. So one example of a modified toxin or protein is Bt toxin, and it's a protein that is toxic to chewing insects and is produced by the soil bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, and has long been used as a biological pesticide for farms. And if this Bt toxin were to genetically were to transfer to our genes, the intestinal bacteria within our intestines would basically serve as a living pesticide farm. But by means of genetic engineering, the genes for Bt toxin can be isolated and transferred to plants. And eventually this whole cycle of us going through this will lead to detrimental effects to our health. So in conclusion, I believe it is important to take notice of the harmful effects that GMOs can pose to our human body. And without the labeled GMOs, the majority of our population will eventually lead or have an allergic reaction, whether it be mild or major. And in order to prevent the new illnesses, allergies, and viruses from evolving and adapting, GMO products should become labeled and ultimately tested for its integrity for the human population as a whole.
Andrew, all the structural stuff is fine. The proposition's clear. There's a good preview in the body of the speech. You're signposting it. The transitions are easy to follow, so I don't see a lot of problem there. You've got some background information that gives us a definition. That helps a little bit. There's also some factual data about what the rules are concerning labeling, which is, I think, okay. That helps establish that there's a little bit of a controversy. The place where there's a little bit of a problem has to do with the arguments that you're talking about, the health effects. You start off with a discussion of allergic reactions, but your material here is kind of vague. I got a hypothetical example of an allergic reaction. I've got a general statement that says scientists believe that there might be health risks. The one piece of information that sounded like it was statistical in nature had to do with some kind of allergens to genetically produced soy products, and it was not a very clearly cited source on that. So, and I don't know what the severity of the allergy was. That was a little bit strange. The only thing you have on the second point is a rat study that you're using, and earlier you told us that animal models are perhaps not all that reliable. So if animal models are not reliable for indicating that it's safe, why are they reliable for indicating that something is dangerous? There seems to be a little bit of an inconsistency there. On the third point, which talks about potential problems with antibacterial issues, that we might lose their effectiveness, it does sound like there's a big conditional argument built in here, and that is if these Bt toxins transfer to the genes. And I'm just wondering, what is the likelihood of any of these things transferring to genetic material? That seems like an awfully big conditional statement without any reason to believe that such a thing is likely to occur. The ingestion of food, the idea that that's going to change our genetic makeup, that strains my knowledge of science. That doesn't mean that it isn't possible and that there aren't ways that it could happen, but you have to explain how that could happen and how likely it is, especially with how widespread the food is. I mean, the argument here would be, look, if 80% of our food has this stuff in it, then all we need is a single instance of this kind of thing happening to create a big problem for us. The real question, though, is, if 80% of the food that we eat is genetically modified, but it has zero chance of producing this outcome, then that's not really something to worry about. What is the chance of this occurring? What's likely? It's kind of speculative, and I don't know what the context of the speculation is, whether it is scientific speculation or just people who they see something that's different and they're a little bit alarmed about it, and then they say, well, what happens if? Well, I don't know. Has anybody ever seen, the only place that we've seen it, for instance, is in plants when they're genetically modified to do that, but that's a lot different than genetically modifying human beings. We're not experimenting on humans to change them, that we're consuming the food. Can that change the genetic makeup? That seems to be the argument that you're making, and I need some reason to believe that that could happen. All right, thank you.